Welcome to the Buzz and Reality Show, the number one Liberty pod out of Detroit. I'm Sean Collins, the guy with a lot to say, and I have a co-host at this point. He's been a co-host forever. Michael White, man, how you doing? You've been on this show like a million times now. So what's up, dude?
I must like being on the show with you, right? I was trying to think this morning how many times I've sat down with you and talked, and it's got to be over like a dozen by now, right? Like at least probably a dozen.
Somewhere in there, you're a frequent flyer. That I should be giving out miles at this point.
I'm telling you, man. It was good to see you in Detroit, meet you in real life. We got to do that back in December.
Cool.
It was cool, man. It was cool. But I tell you what, I'm not a fan of your weather, dude. Man, you can keep all that. Like that was horrible, man. We got off the tram or whatever, the bus, the shuttle bus from the airport to the car rental place, and I thought we had like messed up and landed in Antarctica or something, dude. I was like, this is not. And the guy was like, yesterday it was 50 degrees. I was like, I don't care what it was yesterday. It's like -8 today, man. Dude, that was wild.
Right about now, it might be like 25 degrees at best. It's pretty
really
nasty.
There's supposed to be like a polar vortex coming. Apparently, everybody's talking about it.
Oh my God, dude. I remember when that happened. What year did that happen? 2019.
I think every year now we get one, right? Like,
no, it's 2020. It was actually 2020 before COVID. I remember exactly when it happened because I was painting this massive condo at the time, and I had an employee at the time, which, man, I really miss that guy so much, just because he was such a great worker. But anyways, it was one of those things where it was so cold outside that you couldn't paint exterior walls from the interior side because the paint would just run.
Because the wall was so cold?
Yes.
Wow.
Man. Wild, dude. It was wild. So we had to take a couple of days off because at that time when the polar vortex, it was like 20, 30, 40
I think
below.
that's just winter. I think it's just winter, and the news wants to call, like it seems like we get one of these every year or something. I think we're going to get two. Like there's one this weekend coming, and then there's one like next weekend coming. And so I don't know, man. I think it's just winter. It gets cold in the winter. It gets hot in the summer, and until it stops doing that, I'm not going to believe in climate change. Until
that though, seriously.
Until that total thing swaps, until it's like, man, it's always, we're swimming always in December and we're bundled up in June in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm gonna be like, y'all can, man, that's just called different years. Things are different. That's what happens.
Don't tell Greta that. Don't tell Greta. She will come and get you. She'll come and get you in your sleep, man.
Man, it's we always go down like rabbit trails on this show, but the other day I was listening to a podcast about the Bronze Age collapse, which is kind of this mystery in the world of what really happened to the Bronze Age civilizations, which is again like the ancient Egyptian dynasties, like the Mycenaeans and all these people, like they all go out of like business essentially. They all stop living at basically the same time, or their civilizations collapse. And the research has shown that there's kind of this perfect storm that's happened. There was like some volcanoes, and there was the sun may have had a solar minimum. There was all these things that affected the climate, caused drought, famine, all these things. And I'm going, not a single SUV, not a single power plant, none of these things. And here you got almost all of the known world collapsing under the weight of the world changing. And it made me realize then the same thing that I've always kind of realized, but edified it again, that energy is the answer to climate adversity, not the problem. If it gets too cold to grow stuff outside, you need to have lights inside. If in greenhouses, and that takes energy and materials. We should be thinking in terms of like, how do we conquer the environment, not how do we let the environment conquer us. And it's just, I think that the climate people, I guess I call them, they're almost like a suicide cult. They're so deeply involved in this narrative that human carbon creation is the end all be all of everything. And the fact is we have 4 billion years of planetary history that says that that's not the problem. Again, how many cars was it caused the melting of the ice caps? How many cars, SUVs, coal-powered plants changed the Sahara from a lush tropical rainforest into a desert? The world's always changing. That's just the truth. And I think it's, very, we're all too important to think that we're like the number one cause of all that, basically. Again, total rabbit trail, but I was listening to that the other day. We got into the discussion of weather, so here we are.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. They've been telling us back in the day, they called it global warming.
Yeah, remember
Global
acid
warming,
rain?
acid rain and
Acid
global
rain.
warming. And, they've been telling us we're going to run out of oil and we're going to run out of, seawaters, and not seawaters, but the actual land that's on seawaters. We're going to run out of islands. Everything's going to be swallowed up. Florida and California were supposed to be gone about 20 years ago.
I mean, that'd be cool with California if it had to slide off.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. California.
Well, I mean, I say that in jest. The economic impact would be pretty significant, obviously, but I think maybe the cultural impact may be worth it.
Well, I mean, we would just open up new barges at the end where the water began in the land. Whatever. We would just open up new import and export. California be floating away in the wind somewhere in the water. They'd just be gone.
I'm
and
sure
probably
they'll find a
very
way.
happy at that point. Probably very happy until they needed stuff, anyways. It's always the thing where like it sounds great to live on an island somewhere until you need shit.
Yeah, man. Like if you go to any island in the Caribbean that's not like one of the big ones, like St. Thomas or even Puerto Rico has its problems, but like you go to someplace like St. Kitts, St. Lucia, like the whole island's running off like a diesel generator. Like that's what's powering the whole place, and like that's drawing the water and that's doing everything. And you're like, wow, this is, you're off grid, but like you think you're not. And like, you're like, okay, yeah, you're right. It's not easy to live out in the middle of the ocean. And that goes back to the point. Energy is the answer to climate adversity, to environmental adversity, not the problem.
Which our boy Lars Mapstead tried to point out, but I digress.
Dude,
I digress.
I still haven't unrigged the system sticker on like something I own, and I saw it today, and I was like, man, hope Lars is doing good. I need to send him a text message checking on him. But yeah, you're right. He did. He definitely talked about that quite a bit.
He totally did, because energy is the future. Like energy is everything. Without energy, you can't do anything. You can't run your country. You can't run your lights. You can't run your cars. You can't run your wars. You can't run your monetary system. You need energy for literally everything.
Yep.
And the fun part about that is, nuclear energy would be so efficient and so much cheaper than what we have now.
I mean, in the long run, definitely scaled out over 30, 50 years, you can certainly see the return on investment. But it's funny, dude, like all these big AI companies and data companies and tech companies, because of sort of the physical limitations that we're running up against with silicon wafers, and you just need a massive amount of power to do some of these computations, right? Like GPT-4, I think, was trained on 10 to the 26th floating point operations per second. And give you an idea of how that's a huge number. That's 10 with 26 zeros behind it. 10 to the 78 is like the known number of atoms in the observable universe. So you're talking about a big number to train this. And every 5 years, we kind of go up one order. So like by 2030, you're looking at training AI on 10 to the 27th or 10 to the 28th. Dude, the power needed to do this. That's why they're building like their own micro nuclear reactors now. It's so funny how the greenies are like, oh, well, yeah, to get like GPT-5 running, we might need to have a nuke. Nuclear's great. They're like, all of a sudden, like, solar, man, I don't know about that. Y'all can have that over there. We need a nuclear power plant to run our new Amazon data center. And so AI might be the saving grace of the energy problem, is that, so goes tech, so goes the rest of the world, it seems, at least right now.
Well, I mean, like places like France are doing great things with nuclear energy.
Best in the world.
China is doing some things with nuclear energy. China.
We hope that they're doing it well, right? It's always Far Eastern news, like trying to get like good scientific data out of China. Every time I read a report, like of course it's translated, and then you're wondering like, well, how much of this is actually honest? Like, I mean, or how much is it like the CCP? Like, we're going to put this report out and make people in the West think we're doing these things. But yes, if China is being honest, they are on pace to dominate the world when it comes to nuclear power production. But we'll see. We'll see if that's the case.
I gotta bust in some comments real quick
Sure.
because these people are hilarious. My chat is hilarious, and they are very freaking real. First off, a plague on both your houses. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. A little Shakespeare reference there.
Polar vortex isn't a climate change thing. No, it's
Nope.
not really.
It's just winter.
It's a
dang. Well, we might be annexing the Canadians. I mean, they may be the 51st state.
I am. In San Antonio, the temp gets to 40 degrees. The locals bundle up, and it's like the Arctic Circle. Man,
Yep.
I would kill for 40 degrees right now. I'm just saying, here in Michigan. The Liberty Lady, Michael White, one of the best communicators for Liberty.
Well, thank you, Liberty Lady. Appreciate
He's
that.
not one of the best. He is the best, and it's not even close at this
Thank you.
point. We are in a
humbled and
situation where, like, oh, Amity, no Canadians voting in our elections, please. Amen. No anybody voting in our elections other than people who belong here.
Yeah.
But that's that.
Well, and again, we always get into this discussion about quote unquote democracy. It's just supposed to be a way to pick the elected representatives and for them to vote on justice, just legislation. It's not like everything's up for a vote, but apparently I think people think everything is now up for a vote.
Right.
You're a threat to our democracy, Sean. You're a threat to us having our way. And we don't like that.
Something apparently to the FBI because I'm on one of their lists or 10.
Oh man, if you're not on about 10 by now, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, something, I'm there. Patrick Kirby, I can hear you, Patrick. I love you, dude. Patrick Kirby, let me tell you guys something about Patrick.
One of my favorite people.
Yes, absolutely 100. The dude brings the wisdom and the fire to the Liberty movement without the what do I want to call it? Without my side of things. He's much better than me.
Without the vitriol. He has a way to navigate through the discourse, get right to the point without maybe being too abrasive along the way. Right. He kind of just makes the point and the point stands. Patrick, I know you're listening. We need to do again. We had dinner together at the Libertarian National Convention in DC.
Jealous.
Sat down and had dinner, and it was a great night. I had a great time talking to him. He's just as interesting in person as, of course, he is interacting online. But yeah, Mr. Kirby's a good dude. Thank you so much for popping in.
Michael, thoughts on Maddie, which probably means Massey.
Right. Being the only one
there with balls today with the Johnson vote.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that. Today it's so funny, Sean. I might live in Trump country. Okay. I might live in Little Rock itself might be a Democrat city, but Arkansas is very much Trump country. And so I have a lot of colleagues, I should call them, and associates that are very fond of Trump, and Trump is everything to them and can do no wrong. Right. And anyone who's not on the side of Trump is somehow the enemy of America. And it's interesting to see just how quick they can turn to, 2 weeks ago, Mike Johnson was the biggest rhino in the world. And today, if you're not voting for him for Speaker of the House because Trump wants him to be Speaker of the House, you're the biggest rhino in the world. And I think the truth is that people deep down know that Massey is right. And they don't like that. And they don't like the fact that he is right because it pokes a hole in the narrative that everything is going to be better now that one person was elected. And the truth is, people, if you're listening to this, I'm going to steal Larry Sharpism. We don't need one hero. We need a nation of heroes.
Yes.
There's not any single one person you can elect that's going to fix all of these things. And so, but hey, man, that scares people. They don't want to have to do any work. They want somebody else to take it. So no, of course, Massey was the only voice of reason. That doesn't surprise me at all. Did you notice today he had a scruffy, he showed up not shaved today or something? Have you seen that? Yeah.
Because he's probably tired of just being tired. He's probably why do I have to do this every day? I have to go there. I'm going to vote no. Everybody knows I'm going to vote no. But why the hell do I have to do it in the first place? Because they do already know. But Massey, I feel is the only one who has a brain left in Congress. He really is. And all the people who want, Massey for speaker. No. Please leave him in Congress. Yes, we don't need him as the Speaker of the House. We can have an outsider as the Speaker of the House, such as Justin Amash. Amash would have been a perfect speaker. Massey could have been the brains in the Congress. But no, we get the same shit, different day. And I digress after that because
No, I mean, again, I think maybe just the new year has me a little more black pilled maybe than I have tried to be in the past. And like this morning, my wife was telling me about something going, and somebody's talking about this Cybertruck blowing up, and someone's talking about this, someone's talking about that. And I was just like, it is a waste of oxygen, isn't it? Like, I mean, the truth is that you're being lied to in some way, shape, or form. You know that the people that are the power brokers and the powers that should not be are somehow going to obfuscate the truth from America, use it to their own advantage, turn the people against each other in some divide and conquer strategy, and ultimately, the same parties and players will be enriched that are always enriched from the current paradigm. And until that paradigm shifts dramatically, those are going to be the outcomes you have. And so it's just a matter, you're going to have a bag of jelly beans. And so don't be surprised when you pull out, oh, it's a purple jelly bean. Oh, it's a green jelly bean. Oh, it's a blue one. They're all going to be jelly beans. It's just a different color for that day. That's all it's going to be. And this time, unfortunately, the jelly beans are tyrannical bullshit and the limitation of your rights and the ever-growing, administrative state. And that's the bag of jelly beans that we have. And so thank God that we have a Thomas Massie. But it's almost like, he's just enough to make you hope, but not enough to ever make a change. And
right.
You wonder, he's the exception to the rule. He's not the rule. And that's the sad part, is if you ran a Massie in the 434 other congressional seats, he'd probably only be elected to maybe 2 or 3.
At best.
At best. So that's when you go, man, but hey, we got a lot of foreign money running our government. You got to do what those foreign people want you to do. So we'll just move on from that one.
I mean, you will not say it. I will come out and say it. They're going to do whatever Israel and China wants. They are going to do whatever Israel and China wants. They are bought and paid for. We know this. We have so many receipts on this. But thank God for Thomas Massie. But to move things back, because we got a show to do, we got something to talk about.
All right,
and we could either talk about the current psyops with the guy blowing himself up at Trump Tower in the Cybertruck, or we can go with the other psyop where somebody ran into a crowd of people with their car and got into a shootout with police in New Orleans, which actually kind of speaks close to your heart because you are from Louisiana originally, but to most of us who have a brain, those are false flags.
Well, and certainly I think to most of us that have a brain, we realize that, again, these flashes of chaos only serve for the order to be created in someone else's image, right? And that seems to be the constant. And so anytime I see something crazy happen now, I just go, okay, well, that's really sad. But what's going to be even sadder is probably the rights that we're going to lose because of this.
Right.
And that seems to be the ongoing thing. And so, but I'll be quite honest, being from Louisiana, New Orleans has had good times and New Orleans has had bad times. And, obviously post-Katrina New Orleans was much different than pre-Katrina New Orleans. And there was about probably a golden period of around 10 years where New Orleans was really on the up and up. I mean, advancing in all the good numbers, right? And good things, and tourism was up. It's really kind of become a place that I would not recommend anybody visit. That's just my personal opinion. If you called me and said, hey, Michael, I'm looking to go to New Orleans, or I'd say, take the or. Just do the or. Like whatever the next thing you're going to say is, go there instead, save your money. It's, the least of your concerns in New Orleans is going to be a quote unquote terrorist attack. There's that many people being killed every single day in that city, if not more, and that never makes the headlines, right? So, I think there's a shooting on Bourbon Street probably every Mardi Gras, I think, for the last 4 or 5. So, these things happen, whether they're, again, some sort of agent provocateur or it's just the natural decline of Western civilization in some of these places.
Chris says, I think the fact that he made it to Bourbon Street without getting carjacked shows that crime is down. Silver lining, you're probably right. You are probably right when it comes to that, because New Orleans, outside of all the great things that people see, is actually a very violent city.
Yeah, I mean, it's a place like Detroit or like Little Rock. It's a place you kind of got to keep your head on a swivel. And the difference is that New Orleans has a very large tourist population, right? I mean, there's The French, the French, yeah, the French Quarter draws millions and millions of visitors, and so there's people that land, at Louis Armstrong International Airport and go to their hotel, on Canal or Bourbon, and they never see the rest of New Orleans, right? And it's not a pretty picture out there at all, like at all. And so if you get behind outside from the curtain that they have, and so yeah, you kind of got the worst of two things meeting, at one time.
That's right. And after all that craziness that's happened right after the first of the year, whether it be New Orleans, whether it be Trump Tower, and I believe that was Arizona. If I'm wrong, please fact check me. But the fact of the matter is there's some things that they're hiding that is not in mainstream media, but is very important to the American voters and Americans in general. And that is the election fraud that is happening in your state, which you, my friend, have kind of brought to fruition to show people like, hey, something might not be right here. And now it's turned into something where this might be like some real big federal stuff going on.
Right. And so for one correction is all of this. Yes, there is. We're going to get into it. There's been proven voter fraud, at least in my county, and the method at which that fraud was perpetrated, because the same system is used in every county, it's very likely that it'll be discovered in other counties. But it was not me who brought this to light. It was the very good reporter, Susie Parker, at the South Arkansas Reckoning. I need to say that again, South Arkansas Reckoning. If you were looking for a independent news organization to follow that, covers some stuff, maybe in a state with an AR at the beginning of it, definitely go to South Arkansas Reckoning, give them a membership, back them with your dollars because they do the work. And so let's set the stage here, Sean. I don't need to draw pictures. I think your audience is incredibly intelligent, right? It would probably help if I drew pictures, but so you're going to have to bear with me as I tell this story, okay? For you to understand what occurred. So, Sean, when you go to the polls, or any of us go to the polls and vote, we vote for people in our district, right? And that might be a very small district for like a city council seat, a little bigger for a maybe city council. I mean, for school board, maybe bigger for your state rep, and then your congressional district. And if you don't move physically, your ballot is supposed to have the people that are going to represent you, or the possibility of representing you. And so this is why every 10 years, state legislatures almost have a miniature civil war when they redistrict their states, right? Because they know how important it is to have the geography of the voters align with what they want their broader interest to look like, whether it be in city, county, or state government. And what I mean by that is a fun word called gerrymandering. It just does happen. Let's be quite honest. You would be remiss to think that any side winning is not going to try to make the rules continue to perpetuate their win, right? They do it, and Democrats do it in California, and Republicans do it here in Arkansas. It's just what happens. And if you want that to change, well, have better leaders, representatives in your state legislatures every 10 years. But anyway, that's the only way that you should change who you're voting on. Now, imagine if somebody in your county office that runs your elections. In Arkansas, it's the county clerk's office who runs elections. Imagine if they could just move Sean from District 1 to District 8 at will. Just log into a computer with no oversight, no knowledge of this happening, and they can just move it. And you go to the polls and vote, and the ballot you're given is for District 8 and not District 1. And unless you're paying attention to your down ballot races, you're not any wiser. You go, hey, you know what? I always vote Libertarian. There's no Libertarian on this race. I guess I'll vote for the Republican or whatever. And that's what you do. And then you turn your ballot in, you leave. That would be pretty crazy if that could happen. And the truth is that it did happen. It happened here in Pulaski County in this last election. And it was uncovered again by the reporter Susie Parker at the South Arkansas Reckoning. During early voting in Arkansas, which lasts for 2 weeks prior to Election Day, in every single county, you can vote anywhere in the county anywhere. So if I work across the county and I want to go vote over there, I can walk into a county building over there, that library over there, and they will pull up my ballot over here in West Little Rock. And the machine, it's all done on machines, will have my ballot. And I should be voting on District 75 for state rep, so and so for city whatever. But that's not what happened. There was apparently on day one of voting, somebody who was very well politically connected wanted to vote for a Democrat of all people in North Bossier. I'm not North Bossier, in North Little Rock. And that person was not on their ballot and should have been. And so they raised pure hell, and they just kept raising hell, and they kept raising hell. And they finally, again, this is apparently a very politically connected individual. It comes to find out that someone in the county clerk's office logged into the system and manually changed the entire street from one district to another. The employee, this is mentioned in passing during an election commission meeting that's being broadcast, and Susie Parker and I can't remember that gentleman's name at the South Arkansas Reckoning are watching this broadcast, and they go, "What are they talking about? They're talking about something here with the county clerk's office." So they submit a FOIA request for what they're talking about, and they get a letter that was written from the county clerk to the election commission that said, "Hey, yes, on day one of voting, somebody went to vote, and they couldn't vote on what they were supposed to. And when we looked into it, we found out that an employee in our office had intentionally moved them to a different district. That employee has been removed from her election duties, and we're very sorry. And we promise you that, we uphold the integrity of whatever, yada, 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 yada." It's important to remember, very, very important to remember, that their own internal checks and balances didn't catch this. This was caught by a voter who made enough noise. So, how do you certify an election when not only does the possibility for that to exist, but it did in fact happen? And if it occurred with one street, how many other streets did it occur with, right? And the answer to that question is, until you do an audit, you do not know. That is the only answer to that question. The answer to that question is, you can't say this is the only one, because your own internal checks and balances couldn't catch it. You have no way of knowing if this is the only one because you didn't even know of this one. So as we go to certify the election, I filed a formal complaint with the election commission. I turned it in person at their meeting. It was joined by maybe a couple dozen other citizens in the county that also turned in complaints. We also turned in complaints to the state board and basically said, "Hey, look, you can in good conscience certify this election in Pulaski County, Arkansas, until you have audited this, until you've taken the poll book, which is a list of all the voters and where they should have voted or what races they should have voted in, and then actually the number of ballots and what they voted in," right? That it should line up. And if it doesn't line up, then you know that there was some tomfoolery at play, right? And the argument was at least compelling enough that one of the 3 election commissioners in our county refused to certify the election, which is fairly unprecedented. Interestingly enough, the major media didn't want to cover this, which is crazy to me. This is a pretty big story. And one of the other election commissioners said, "Well, look, I think the law requires me to certify the election, but I will join you in making our own formal complaint to the Attorney General's office and to the 6th District Prosecutor's office." And so that was where that ended that night. Now, after that, I continued working social media, the voter base, everybody else, and said, "Hey, look, we need to flood the state office with complaints about this election. Here's the complaint, send it to them. So the record has thousands of them in there." I don't know how many we end up getting in, but it was quite a bit. And now it's just a waiting game as to what will be the outcome of this. Here's my prediction. I have 2 predictions, and I would be I'm equally in whichever one of these would happen. I got equal odds on these. One is that the status quo was maintained, Sean, and nothing happens. Okay, there is a superficial at best look at this from the state authorities, and that's all they do, and they move on. And then behind the scenes, maybe the Pulaski County clerk goes, "Okay, we can't do this again. They got way too close to us." Or, and this is the only other or, is that there is an audit that is performed, a thorough and rigorous one, which is transparent for the public to be able to say, yes, that was a good one. And heads are going to roll because massive amounts of fraud happened. Because I know, at least on election day, we got contacted by 4 voters who said that I was not on their ballot. They received ballots from other districts. And so I've saved that little tidbit for the end. I had one of my own campaign volunteers during early voting who lives in my district went to go vote, and I was not on his ballot. And he had to raise hell at the polling place to get his ballot corrected. Another one of my campaign donors, first time they ever voted in an election was this election. They registered this year just to vote for me. Okay. They're like, and they're 40 something years old, never voted, but they're like, I'm going to vote for Michael. They had to fill out a provisional ballot because I wasn't on their ballot. So all these people got different answers. Now, my race particularly, I don't know what the impact was, but I know this. My race had a record low turnout, and the district right next door had a record high turnout. I also know that the race next door was supposed to be this 50-50, very close race between a Republican incumbent and a Democrat challenger. And the data that we had said that my race was going to be very, very close between myself and the Democrat incumbent. Both of those races ended up 65-35 for the incumbent. And if you think about it, Sean, it's not hard to make those numbers happen. Like I said, hey, if you live in the inner city, I'm just going to have you get a ballot for this girl. So you make sure that she's for it. And if you live over here and you're typically vote conservative, we're going to make sure you get a ballot for this guy. And that's all you got to do. It's not hard at all. And so that's where my 2 predictions are. That's the summary of what's been uncovered. I know that was very long-winded, but I hope that we covered at least all of it.
Well, I feel like we should kind of go back to like election night, because I actually talked to you that night.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
And a lot of things happened that night. Like a lot of things happened that night. I am. Wow. Fascinating story. Shocking, not shocking. You're not wrong. The corruption goes deep and wide. Absolutely. Chris says, if the law requires you to certify something, there's no reason to have certification.
Absolutely. Chris, great point. That's first off, one of the best points being made is you read the election law of Arkansas, and why does it even exist? Because it does read as well. On the 7th day after the close of this, the election commission will meet and certify the election. That's like how the law is written. It doesn't say on the 7th day after this, the election commission will meet and they will use their due diligence to determine if things were honest and above board. And if they determine they were, they'll certify it. It just says they'll meet 7 days later and they'll whatever. And so, he's 100% spot on. The law is written, surprise, surprise, to ask no questions.
And it's insane. But I talked to you on election night. I texted you and I was like, hey, man, how are things going? And you actually called me and was like, yo.
Yeah, dude. I mean, because we had really good data on voters. I spent like, I don't know, there's a spreadsheet somewhere that I put this out there, but I want to say I spent like $3,000 or $4,000 on voter data. For a state rep race where, about 15,000 people are going to vote, that's a pretty significant number. You're looking at 33 cents a vote or something like that. And we tracked all of this stuff throughout the election. And, we thought we had a pretty good beat on the number of people that were voting and what their sort of political, affiliations were and what those were likely to line up with our messaging with. And as we went into voting, it was like, I can make the case that she's 800 ahead. I can make the case that I'm 100 ahead. I could look at the data and I could say, it's just too close for me to call, right? And several very smart people also looked at it and said, look, this is what we call too close to call. And so when election night, when we got the results and they came in like it was nothing, and then all of a sudden we got all of them, right? It was 65-35. And it was like, I was like, that can't be all the people that voted. This is the Trump-Kamala election. We've had lines around the polling places every single day. The news has been talking about how busy the polls are. You can't tell me that this is the number. It was a very low number, comparatively speaking. I was like, that's not what happened. That reality, my own eyes and ears don't see that. And so the undervote total that we ended up getting, which is number of people that voted at the polling place that quote unquote live here, but did not cast a ballot in my election, was about 10%. Sean, this doesn't happen Okay.
Right.
Typically mathematically, I'm not a 17th place down ballot race. By the way, there's races below me further down ballot where that in my district was less. So the logic has to be that during one of the most divisive and expensive elections in presidential election history, with record turnout and record involvement in America, that in a battleground purple district in a red state that's itching to vote for Donald Trump, that not a single district in my district, not a single precinct went for Trump, and that the undervote total was a record number in my race. Meanwhile, the race right next door that shared multiple polling places on election day, and of course, polling places during early voting, had a record high number. I mean, Sean, like these are the same people. Like there's people that like live down the street that live in 78 that shop at the same place I shop at, and these are the same. These are the same sort of people. There's just a little bit more of a conservative slant as you get further out of the city, of course, and of course more of a Democrat slant as you get closer to the inner city. And the district I am kind of lies right on the edge of that. And so, yeah, 65-35, record low turnout. Something didn't add up. And thank you, Susie Parker at South Arkansas Reckoning, because we would have been told prior to this being unveiled and admitted to by the county clerk, they did not want this letter to come out, that this was impossible. You'd have been told that nobody could do this. And so I've tried to contact, I've done my best so far. I need to be careful about what I say here, Sean, because some things are ongoing. Okay.
Right.
And so I can't lay out a bunch of strategy, but I'll tell you this. There's a vendor, ES&S, who runs Arkansas elections during early voting, particularly. And they run the poll book, which is one component of the election, which uses COTS, commercial off-the-shelf solutions. So they're iPads and Android tablets, and they're all connected to a central database at county clerk's offices, where the county clerk updates the voter list and what precinct you're supposed to vote in, and that's sent out to all the tablets at all the voting locations. You show up, I check you off the list. It goes back to the county clerk and says you've come and voted, right? That's done at every single county in Arkansas. I've reached out to them trying to understand, like, hey, send me white papers and technical information about or even just your training documents on how you would train. If I was a county clerk and I was going to buy your software, what would you train my employees to do? How would you train them? Like, what are the functionalities of the software? No response. I've sent them a request and said, okay, if you can't give me that response, what is the current version that your software is currently running on, and what are the updates? Like, what is your revision history of the software from when you released it to what updates have been pressed? What features were changed? No response. They don't want people to look into this stuff, because the truth is, obviously, this, which is anybody in the county clerk's office can log in and change you in your precinct in real time with no audit trail, and then can change you back. And then can change you right back. So you can be redistricted at whim in any county that uses this system. I can't say that that's happened in every county, but I can tell you, Sean, that it's so much of a possibility that would be like if you went to your bank and they said, yeah, we always leave the vault door open, but to our knowledge, only one person's ever walked in and stolen anything. That would be what the equivalent of it is. And so, yeah, it's very involved, and there's multiple states that use this system. This is big money, big business, and the status quo wants these things to remain as they are. They do not want these vulnerabilities coming to light, and they certainly don't want people like me asking questions.
No, they don't.
No, they do not.
Not at all. Which is what you're doing right now. So here's the catch, y'all. I talked to Michael White on election night. I said, hey, man, how things, I texted him. I said, how are things going? I get an immediate call back. Things aren't going so good, but, I'm not going to say I won and got robbed or anything like that. One thing I really respect about you, Mike, is that you're not running around saying this shit was stolen. It was stolen from me and it's all wrong and blah, blah, blah. No, you went at the approach by saying, hey, I probably did lose, but there's some indiscrepancies here that needs some attention. And, we went from there. So I talked to you. we get on the phone. You're like, hey, things aren't going so good. I'm like, well, what do you need? I asked you straight up. I'm like, what do you need? What do we need to find out here? Well, I don't really know. Some along those lines. You say, I don't really know, but something isn't right, and I don't know what to do.
Yep.
So
I think those were kind of my exact words, which was, I think at the time I was trying to formulate exactly what it was that was wrong, and I said, Sean, something's wrong, and I don't know what to do, and that was kind of where I was with it. Something is wrong, and I knew something was wrong, and I did not know what to do. Yeah,
and so I was like, hey, man, I actually have some connections out there.
Yeah,
But believe it or not, the smallest world of small world shit of all things that could be happening, especially during election cycle. A buddy of mine named Will Huff, I went to school with him. We played high school football together, happened to be Colonel Conrad Reynolds' campaign manager, who you ran against in the congressional run in 2022.
he was the primary challenger for the Republican incumbent
Yes.
that I ran against in the general election. Yes, he was.
So like,
we're very connected. Yeah,
it's so crazy.
Yes.
And I'm like, and in the meantime, between all that stuff, like you and Conrad kind of, have some sort of like understanding and stuff like that. You guys are cool with each other.
Yeah, man. And so he runs the Arkansas Voter Integrity Initiative now.
Yes.
And that's what he focuses on, is Conrad focuses on this issue. And so he was very helpful in sort of kind of directing me as to, you can read the law if you want to, but until like someone tells you how it really works, you and I both know what that's like. Like,
right.
You're in a trade. I can watch a YouTube video about how to do something, or I can sit and have a guy do it with me, and every little change or every little thing they're there to tell you, oh, well, yeah, in this instance, you do this, and this, you do this. So he was very helpful in guiding in that of how the process was going to work, and what the sort of administrative T's and I's basically that needed to be done. And so, yeah, I mean, that at least got to where we are, but none of that, again, would have happened if it was not for this single FOIA request by this tiny little news outlet. Had they never done this, nobody would be the wiser. Nobody. And
now, when did they come into play? Because, when I talked to you that night, and then I called my boy Will, and I was like, yo, this is what's going on, because he's part of that voter integrity initiative. He actually helped write that up.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, this is going on, and what can we do about it? And he gave me a number to the election commissioner, and I want to say her name's Susan or Susie, something like that. It's been a while now, I don't remember. And he's like, yo, have him call this number. It has to happen tonight, and do the thing. And so I gave you the number, you did it. And this is, mind you, like, this is midnight my time at this point. I'm going, like, Will, I need your help, man. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
He was pulling through a drive-through with his wife, going, hey, man, what do you need? And I'm like, yeah, blah, 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 whatever. Long story short, he really came through in the clutch, and they helped out. And then you guys went to I don't want to call it a city council meeting, but it was
the election. It was the night that the election commission was going to meet to certify the election.
Yes.
And that's where we went there. And that was where I hand delivered my complaint. And then, like I said, a couple dozen other citizens joined me at that meeting and also hand delivered complaints. Because the state law requires that that the county board has to hand these to the state, right? The state law requires that. And so this is really just a process of, we're still going to turn one into the state too, but we're bringing them here to you so that you're compelled to take an action now. Like, you might certify this election tonight, but you're going to have to do so understanding that there's 24 complaints here that make a lot of sense. And by the mission of the Owen County Clerk's office, something's awry here. And so, proceed at will, basically. And that's what we did. And I think that was very successful in getting, at least, like I said, one of the election commissioners was so compelled to move to say that she would not certify the election. Again, this is huge news. This is huge news, and nobody covered it.
Nobody talked about it. Nothing. It was so bizarre. And the fact that not only, like, I have the recording from that actual meeting, the election certification meeting, where not only did you get up and talk, which you kept such a level head through that. I don't know how you did it. My boy Will actually got up and talked, where they actually told him he needed to calm down.
Yeah, they did.
Which really pissed me off.
So I kept a level head because I left right after I spoke. I was very, and I was having a very hard time. And my wife knew that I was, and like she knows me better than anybody, right? And she was like, "Hey, let's get out of here," because she knew that I was this close to just losing it. And Sean, I can be very composed, but when I lose it, I'm very dangerous, and I'm not good to be around. And I'm not good to be around. And so I was right there at the edge of it, and because it was just boiling up in my system when I was considering this. And again, thank you for pointing out that I've never said, "Hey, look, I won this and it was stolen from me." What I'm saying is that under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, we all have equal protection under the law, are supposed to. Part of that equal protection is being able to vote in the things that you're supposed to vote in. The county clerk's office knew on day one of early voting that violation had occurred. And what did they do? They secreted this information. They never contacted a poll worker. They didn't contact a single candidate. They didn't contact the Attorney General's office. They didn't contact the news. They didn't say anything. They knew this was going on, and they tried to keep it quiet because they realized very quickly that every single one of these people, if you're one of anybody, if it ends up being 100, 200, 1,000, doesn't matter, you have a fat daddy federal civil lawsuit against the county clerk's office. You were denied equal protection under the law. And oh, by the way, willfully at this point in time, you might can say, hey, the first four, we didn't know. But at that point in time, the law requires that if something's going bad, that you take steps to mitigate damages. And you can be held more liable for failing to do so, even if the outcome is the same, right? So again, as a painter, maybe, I don't know, the floor is leaking and there's a pipe that's on, right? And you're licensed, insured, and bonded. You're kind of under an obligation at that point in time to try to make sure, turn the water off. You're going to mitigate the damages, right? You're not just going to say, hey, it was leaking when I was here and it's been leaking for 2 fucking weeks.
Right.
That's
actually happened to me before.
Right.
Y'all got to turn the water off and call a plumber.
You got to do something.
I did,
I'm mitigating the damages. I'm aware of an issue, and now I'm going to take steps to make sure that the ramifications of this are as limited as possible. And again, this is a legal requirement of almost all tort law somewhere. They didn't do that. They did the opposite. They were like, we're just going to close our eyes and we're not going to look anywhere else.
They ran it.
And we're not going to tell anybody. And we're just going to hope it goes away. And that was it. They just hope it went away. And I sat there that night in the election commission meeting and I looked over at the county clerk. Her name is Terry Hollingsworth. And she had a look on her face like she was in over her head. She didn't look at me with disdain. She didn't look at me like, hey, I was trying to get one over on people and you busted me. She had a look on her face, Sean, like, I didn't want to be a part of this. That's the look that I got from this woman. And that's why I am confident that if an investigation occurs, you're going to find that this is much larger than just 4 voters on one street. Much larger than that.
Well, and that's the whole thing. So like you go there and speak your piece. My boy Will speaks his piece. Conrad actually goes up there and points out the indiscrepancies in the computer voting itself. Now, and I'm going to read an article actually that Will sent me because I asked him to send it to me. That's very important to all of this because Conrad not only pointed out how the system could be finagled, but he also shows that it can be cheated as well.
Right.
He did it out in the open, and they said it was crickets. They didn't say shit. It was nothing. And meanwhile, they're threatening to have Will, taken out or watch his mouth or whatever, which really pissed me off because, like, look, y'all, I don't know what to tell you people, and this is going to be a hard pill to swallow for some, but elected officials are your employees.
That's correct.
They need to be treated as such. They are not your fucking rulers, period.
And Will was not, I don't think that Will ever crossed a line or a threshold into personal disrespect. Right. I mean, being impassioned about something is not a disrespectful in nature by itself, right? And he was not defamatory. He was not like, I'm going to jump across the table and punch you in the face. None of those things. The truth is that he was just saying it like he saw it, and it was very true, and they didn't like it, and they didn't like hearing it. But I'll
And
tell
they
you what,
threatened them. They literally threatened them out.
let me tell you something too that's really interesting is there's 3 election commissioners in county in Pulaski County, and 2 are from the major party of the state and one's from the minor party. So you have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. All right. The Democrat representative, I guess, or election commissioner, she walked in. This is certifying the election. Okay. Now, look, maybe I'm a little old school, but you're going to show up to certify an election. Maybe you should like dress appropriately. That's my personal opinion. This lady's like in blue jeans that are like torn up and like a ratty t-shirt to like certify an election. I kind of thought that was a little in poor taste, but that's just my personal opinion. I know that that's really shallow to say that. That's just me. I would, if it was my daughter, I wouldn't have let her leave the house to go certify an election looking like that. I'd be like, honey, you need to go put something nicer on. The citizens of your county deserve for you to treat this with respect, right? It's like showing up for a funeral, like in your swim trunks. You just wouldn't do it. But anyway, she could not stop rolling her eyes during all of this. And then every time somebody was speaking, she was just like, and that's why Will goes, and I think I said it to her. I said, I handed you one, and I know you didn't look at it because I watched you. And I think Will even said something about her and said, you've been over here just rolling your eyes for like 10 minutes. Yeah. And that's what she was doing. Every time somebody said something, like even factual information, like pointing out something like, and then this letter from the county clerk came out, and she'd be, I'm talking about the most dramatic, like there's not a camera on her, but if you could have watched it, she was over the top animated about like how this was obviously ruining her day. That how dare us little peasants come in here and say, your job is to make sure an election's above board, and there's clearly something wrong here. Like she couldn't handle that problem.
And that's crazy. Oh boy. Actually, we got to get in some of these comments because
we do. We got a lot of them here.
If more people knew who they were voting for instead of just voting the letter next to their name, this would have never happened. Amen, Chris. Amen. Because y'all, nobody really pays attention to state and local shit. They don't. They see the top of the ticket. They see their president. They see maybe some senators and maybe some congressional people. And then that's it. And then from there on out, it's the R or the D. And you are 100% correct, Chris.
So here, I have like on ground level experience with this. I knocked on about 3,000 doors during my election. And I probably talked to, in person, 1,000 voters in my district. That would probably be, if the number was more than that, it wouldn't surprise me. And about half of these people are Democrats and half of them are Republicans. And I would say that 99% of these voters didn't even know who their state rep was. It didn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican. Like the people that were going to end up voting for her, probably, if I met a Democrat at their door, they didn't know who she was. They didn't know who their state rep was. These people are not paying attention. Again, it's a letter behind the name, and that's what they're looking at. And so, like I said, hey, man, make sure if you have a really tight race between a Republican and a Democrat over here, just make sure that if you don't want the Democrat to win over there, make sure that those voters over here go here, or these voters go here. It's not hard to do. And that's exactly what happened.
And that, and that's just the way things go. But I'm gonna bring this article up, which is
now we have to pretend we've never been at a funeral. So yeah, okay, Chris, that's fair enough. That's a good point. This is a good point. If I was, there's some days here in Arkansas that if you probably passed on, you had to be carried by your boys. Maybe they should be in swim trunks. It's probably that hot. It's just, hey.
It's true though. It's so crazy. And people are right. Like Zack Attack. When the fuck are people going to understand that Republicans are still the same socialists they were founded as, and the Democrats
capitulated.
Became Zach with your words. I tell you what, I love Zack Attack. But check this out. This is an article from the Rasmussen Reports, which has to do with the voter integrity initiative that Will Huff and Colonel Conrad Reynolds came up with in your state. By nearly 2-to-1 margin, voters in Arkansas support calls for switching their state's election to paper ballots because everything is run by machine there.
Right.
Everything is run by machine to where, like here in Michigan, we have paper ballots and we feed that ballot into a machine. Not that saying that's any better because machines can be manipulated, but, and Conrad was great about showing the manipulation of the machines as well. A new telephone and online survey by Rasmussen Reports and the Arkansas Voter Integrity Initiative finds that 59% of likely Arkansas voters support their state only allowing hand-marked ballots for voting, including 37% who strongly support the paper ballots only proposal. 31% oppose allowing hand-marked ballots, including 17% who are strongly opposed. Another 10% are not sure. Nearly 2/3, 65% of Arkansas voters are concerned that there will be cheating in the 2024 election involving electronic voting machines, including 44% who are very concerned. 32% are not concerned about electronic voting machines being involved in the election cheating, including 16% who are not at all concerned. The survey results have vindicated that the relentless efforts of Conrad Reynolds, a retired Army colonel and CEO of Arkansas Voter Integrity Initiative, the group said in a statement, amidst growing concerns over the integrity of electronic voting, a substantial majority of the state's citizens are now advocating for a transformation to hand-marked paper ballots and hand count audits before elections are certified.
Yep.
The survey of 893 Arkansas folks, likely voters, conducted on November 26, 2023 by Rasmussen Reports and the Arkansas Voter Integrity Initiative, the margin simply error is minus 3 percentage points with a 95% level of confidence. Field work for all Rasmussen Reports survey is conducted by Pulse Opinion Research LLC.
I think we can end it there.
No,
we can end. Yeah.
73% of Arkansas voters agree that every election should be audited by hand counting votes.
And what's in
the biggest part is 73% want hand counted votes, paper ballots. They want this. And then what did Arkansas do? They turned around and laughed in their face and said, we're not doing this.
Yes, this is correct. So the part of that you're missing is that there have been counties that have voted for this to use paper ballots, and they've been denied this opportunity. Again, there is some reason that the status quo in a red bow, they want this as it is. The Republican Party of Arkansas recently voted at their last convention to have closed primaries. This has been rebuffed by the party itself. Sarah Huckabee Sanders nominated the chairperson and said, hey, you know what? Who's openly against this and not doing the will of the convention? There is an embedded class, a political class that I've come to learn. And naively, 8 years ago, I would have told you there was some sort of difference. And 6 years ago, I told you there's not much difference. And 4 years ago, I would have told you they're exactly the same. There's a few outcroppings, right? They're not just exactly the same. They're working with each other. There is literally a uniparty, and that is how it exists in functionality. It is only on the surface level, the voter-facing level, where there is any distinguishable difference. And if you notice, these differences are typically on something like social matters, something like this. But when it comes down to actually legislating and running things in rubber meeting road, what happens? Unanimous agreement on the things that are against the will of the people and the betterment of the people every single time, right? And so there's when this came out, and I saw this happen with the county, and then I saw this issue with the state, and I saw the issue with the Republican Party of Arkansas, and we had the issue with the county voting to get paper ballots and all this stuff going on. You realize if we can't accomplish this in a red state, we can't accomplish this in a supermajority red state where, again, by their own poll, the supermajority of people want this. And who's talking about voter integrity but Republicans, right? Right? That's a big thing. We're going to have single day voting. We're going to have this. We're going to have that. We're going to have this. Never mind the fact the Constitution leaves elections to the states in many ways. All these talk. It's all talk. It's all talk. Look, the game is rigged and they want it rigged. I'm just telling you, that's the truth. They want it rigged, and you can hem, haw, and huff about it all you want to. But if you're not going to get out there and do the work, it's going to keep happening. We're not changing it with polls. We're not going to change it with, getting mad at somebody. That's not changing it. It's just not going to. The
Uniparty will be working hard to divide and defang MAGA like they did with the Tea Party.
Oh, 100%.
Let's talk about that real quick. We
100%.
should bring that up. So there was a huge move. There was actually a couple huge movements where both sides came together. Republicans and Democrats came together and came up with the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street.
Right. They were very close to each other.
Around the same time, too.
Well,
Around the 2007-8.
In historical terms, yeah, they're very close. This is 4 to 5 years apart. You know, I think the Tea Party is really hitting its height. The 2008, 2009 financial crisis, right, is really bringing that about. Billionaires being bailed out on Wall Street. And then you're just a few years later, I guess a year into Obama's year into his second term, or the last year of his first term. So like 2012.
Yes.
You have Occupy Wall Street. And these are both these very they were labeled as different things. Like the Tea Party was sort of, again, I think was more appropriately labeled. It was against the administrative state. It was against the growing, taxation without representation. It was against sorts of the bureaucracy and the ruling class, rules for thee, not for me. And Occupy Wall Street was really more branded as it was like a left-wing sort of rage against the capital machine, right? And it was, but the truth is that these are the same things. Okay, these are the same things.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, Lockheed Martin, right? Their largest shareholder is still their largest shareholder. Like you can't rage against the administrative state and not be raging against, the controlled capital markets that we have. We don't have free markets. We have these very controlled and rigged capital markets. Again, I always say that we have in America, we have private profits and public losses. Hey, my company, if I'm a big Wall Street company, I make money, I get the money, I need a bailout, you got to pay for it. Every time. Right. Every time, man. And so, yeah, they got too close to each other, Sean. So you had the left wing and the right wing in many ways ideologically coming together about something. And as soon as you did, man, you had this injection in the media.
The media came in, was like
with transphobia. And
yes.
You can go and track this in real time on Google, these terms, white supremacy, all these things.
2010 was the breaking point.
And they all ramped up at this point in time because we have to play identity politics and we have to get you, like I said. And so when Patrick is talking about defanging MAGA and dividing MAGA, that's exactly what's going to happen. The last thing that they want is common sense people sort of on the periphery to kind of join, quote unquote, the MAGA movement, right? And so they're going to always paint things as with as much hyperbole as possible. And here's the real crux of the situation. And I said this, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago. You can go look on my Twitter when I said it. The numbers have been faked all through Biden's term. Okay.
Yes.
They will release jobs numbers, economic numbers, CPI numbers, whatever they are. And the headline number will be really good. And 6 weeks later, it is quietly revised down to the real number. And the real number is way worse than the number that was listed, right? And so the media is not lying. They're just telling you the truth later. Okay? All right? And the people that are keeping the numbers are just telling you the truth later. They're not lying. All that's got to happen now is the real number comes out as the headline number. Nothing fundamentally has to change in the economy. You just start giving the real number, the 6-week revised number as your headline number, and all of a sudden, America in a recession, Trump's fault.
Which, wow, we're close. But I just totally had an ADD moment, like
sure.
big time, like squirrel. Where we at? You brought up the one election commissioner that was like, I'm not going to solidify this election. But we forgot the other 2 election commissioners that slowly followed after that said, we are going to make a complaint about this now.
One of them did. The other Republican did. So it was 2 out of 3. The Democrat was not going to ever.
Okay.
Again, Pulaski County, Arkansas. Pulaski County is one of like 3 Democrat strongholds, right? I mean, so there's a lot of Democrats here. This is old Clinton country, in many ways. Very entrenched. And so, yeah. There weren't the Democrat, that lady that was put on the election commission, she was put there by the Democrat Party of Arkansas to not ask questions, to not make any waves. Like if it goes our way, you just stamp it off. Now, if the Democrat Party had been like trying to lead some national revolt against certifying elections, I guarantee you she'd have done that, right?
Of course.
Because they'd have fallen in line. They don't think, Sean, they just do what they're told. And so she was told, don't ask questions. Everything's above board. And she was told, I guess, so many times that she was irritated that people even questioned it. Again, I wish we had her on video because you could play that all the time and you'd really show the disdain that these people have for the citizens. Like we were bugging her. She's here to certify the vote of us, and she can't be bothered with us. Think about that for a second.
Yeah, and that's so vile and it's so gross. And these are the people who are in charge of, certifying elections.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not just a clever name, and they're literally just saying, "Hey, you peons don't matter. It doesn't matter what you say, and we're just going to run this shit as we see." But now there's people actually standing up and saying, "No, we're not going to do this," and it's fantastic to see this. Like, my dude, you have stirred the pot. You have really stirred the pot. And now there's going to be some people who are facing some serious federal prison time if this goes forward.
There's a couple of things that, are interesting. One is, as soon as I started making these waves, and again, Susie Parker and her news breaks, and then again, it's a small news story that's not being picked up by a bunch of people. And so it becomes like a bigger sort of public issue when we make the formal complaint to the county commission. And I think that I made a video on X regarding it. And I want to say it had like 80,000 views.
Nice.
So this becomes sort of a bigger thing. So there's all this going on, but none of the major quote unquote media wants to cover it, right? All of a sudden I'm getting messages from people, Democrats on my Facebook, people coming and commenting on my stuff. I'm a sore loser. Why are you wasting time with this? Like, people that have never commented, never engaged with my content ever, come out the woodwork. Like, do not talk about this. Do not, like, we're going to make you look stupid as much as we can. A reporter called me. I was on my way to Kentucky, and a reporter from one of the major TV stations called me one morning. I was like, finally, they're going to cover the story. And he started asking some questions. And I answered a couple of them. And he said, okay. He said, well, we're also going to send you an email so you can send us a statement, whatever. So, okay. Never got an email. Never got anything. Story runs. It's as milquetoast as possible. Like, nothing about me's in there. Nothing. I'm the guy that made the original complaint, right? That caused one of the 3 election commissioners not to certify the election. Not even covered. My name's not even mentioned, which is par for the course, though, Sean. I want to remind you that I was not covered a single time by Little Rock Media in my election.
I was about to get into that.
Not a single time. Not a single time. In fact, in the voter guide that comes out, which is almost like it's like the Sears Wish book for voters in Pulaski County. It is a time-honored tradition that the Arkansas Democrat Gazette publishes a voter guide. And District 75, West Little Rock, is like 45% of the county's tax base. It is an important area, to say the least. It doesn't even exist in the voter guide. It's just like there's not a race happening in 75. It's like, oh, here's 74, here's 78. Like, no, it's just not there. It doesn't say, not one line, Rep. Ashley Hudson versus nothing. They did not want any of this covered. And so I went back and counted all the press releases we sent out and like all the contacts. And we would have sent out over 1,000 press releases over the term of the entire election. And not a single one was ever picked up by any Little Rock media. When we raised $12,000 in 24 hours, not picked up by media. That should be significant.
That's
right?
a big deal.
I mean, a libertarian runs and gets $12,000 in 24 hours. That's big. That's a pretty big deal. Like, I mean, at least
state rep in general, like that's
yeah,
like state.
That's not small. That's not small news, right? We had there were some interesting things that occurred during the election. We made, I think, a number of comments about, never picked up. They quoted other people, other candidates. And what's interesting is there's all these races throughout the state where Democrats got the same percentage of the vote or less than me, and you could go search their name, and they've been covered like a dozen or 24 times. So again, there was a coordinated effort to make sure people did not know about this election. They did not want people to know my name, and they certainly don't want them to know my name talking about this issue. Yes, yellow journalism for sure.
They didn't want to, like, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to bring that up. The fact is there was all these other elections going on around you. They were talking about it. Things were being spoken of. Yours, crickets, nothing, zip, nada. Now, Ashley Hudson is kind of a big deal per se, right? Like, she's one of those people who's pretty well known in Arkansas.
No, she's now, I think, becoming like a go-to for the Democrat Party. I think that she's played her part well, right? But she's not, I mean, I wouldn't say she's well known. I mean, again, like, her voters don't know her. I mean, I guess maybe other people do, but People in her district don't know who she is.
She's well known enough to be backed by the Communist Chinese Party, the China Communist Party.
That's right. She was elected to the
she's
state
well known enough for
legislative.
that. We do have receipts on that, by the way.
Yeah, she
Isn't
is.
she WEF? I don't know if she's WEF, but she's backed by the CCP 100.
Yeah, the SLLF chose her. She's one of the people that they have. And of course, when Governor Whitmer from your state came down to Arkansas and told the Democrat Party that we're going to do in Arkansas what we've done in Michigan, she, of course, attended that meeting and took a picture with her. And I want to be really clear. When I began running this race or running in the race that I ran in, I didn't ever want to talk about Representative Hudson. I was way more focused on what I was going to talk about, like what's going on, let's restore representative government. We're taxed too damn much. We pay far too many taxes in Arkansas for all these things to be this way. We never can own our homes. We can't own our cars. Like all these things, like this constant growing prison complex, like all these things. And the first day that she finds out that she has an opponent, she comes out and she calls me an anti-government extremist, like out the gate. And I was like, well, now I have to talk about her. And that was quickly quieted. Like somebody, I think in her circle was like, hey, you can't acknowledge him, because that was the only acknowledgement we ever got. And then after that, it was just, like I said, crickets, absolute crickets from there on.
And that's a sad state of affairs, because you were the perfect candidate. I'm not even just saying that because you're my friend or a libertarian or anything like that. Like, you literally were always coming out saying, hey, voters, check this out. Voters, check this out. Voters, check this out.
We worked really hard.
It was never about you, though, one time. And just like what's going on right now with this trouble with the voter fraud or the election fraud, it's not about you. You've already conceded and been like, yo, I lost my race. This is
right.
about you guys.
Right.
This is about the voters at this point. It has nothing to do with me, which God bless you for that, because people like Donald Trump be like, stolen. It was stolen from me. And we're going to get the bad guys. These Democrats are so bad, and we're going to get them the next time. And that was never you. That was never, ever you. You said, hey, I didn't make the cut, but this is what's going on now, and we're gonna move forward with this. Thank God.
Well, and again, the larger ramifications are the fact that this system is employed in every county in my state, and it's employed in like 32 other states. So this is much bigger than just Pulaski County, Arkansas. The truth is that if you live in a place that employs this system, and you can throw a dart at the map of America and have a very good chance of hitting one of those places, you're very likely subject to this exact same thing. Something that, again, you would have been told was impossible. Apparently, it's not only possible, it actually happens. There's no internal checks and balances to catch it. And even when it was caught, like in Dallas County in Texas, there's a story, go find it, where they admit that there's 3,000 voters or 5,000 voters that were counted the wrong way, that they got the wrong ballots, and they don't even care. I mean, so like they've gotten like almost brazen with these admissions, and they use the same system that we used here in Pulaski County. So this is much bigger than here, and the ballot's only one half of it. I think that Colonel is doing great work with AVII for hand counted, hand marked paper ballots. But if the poll book can be still manipulated, if county clerk's offices or low level employees can quote unquote redistrict voters at will, then you have a glaring security loophole that no hand-marked ballot will catch, right? Because the question that you have to do, the real solution to this is you need to know the number of people that were supposed to vote in certain races, the number of people who showed up at the polls, and then how many of those races were actually voted in, right? And so they should all line up. And any audit process that doesn't do that is wholly incapable of discovering the truth or the scope of the problem. And so, like I said earlier, I have two predictions, and I'm equal in either one of these happening. One is the status quo is maintained. There's a superficial at best investigation. Number two, there's a thorough investigation that involves a process much like I just explained to you. And I think that it's going to show massive amounts of this. I think enough that it's going to really surprise people. We're not going to be talking about 1 or 2%. I think that it's going to be 15 to 20% by the time you look at it in aggregate. I mean, we have reports that we compiled that we also sent in of people that were getting different U.S. congressional ballots, that were voting in different congressional races because they were in Eastern Pulaski County and they weren't voting. They were getting, French Hill Marcus Jones ballots, and they were supposed to be getting, congressional district whatever ballots. And here's the reason why: because the people in that part of the county typically vote Democrat. And Marcus Jones was the Democrat Party of Arkansas's golden child. They wanted him to be the next Congress. That was like Vortex PAC's mission, is let's get him in as a Democrat representative. We'll have one of four. So they were this goes much deeper than just one low-level employee of the county clerk's office. And I also want to back up, and I want people to close their eyes and think about this for a second. For someone to execute a fraud like this, they have to have a pretty decent understanding of the election methods at play, right? You're talking about not a surface level understanding. This is a much larger understanding. They had to have an understanding of okay, I can log into here. I can do this. This isn't caught. What parts of the city are likely to vote this way? What parts of the city are likely to vote this way? Where should I move them to make the most impact in these races? This came from someone else. And I think that whoever that person is, I think that we might have their name. I'm not sure right now. The employee's name, who actually apparently resigned, and in her resignation letter said that she had a lapse of judgment and character or something like that in her letter. Like, she admits that she did this on purpose. I would hate to be her right now.
She's in deep shit.
I mean, not really necessarily in deep shit, but like, let's say that, I mean, she is in deep shit. But if I am like the attorney general, I'm like, who told you to do this? Because you didn't just do this on your own. You're a $12 an hour employee at the county clerk's office, right? Like, you're not some criminal election mastermind. Somebody told you to do this, right? And who told you? And like I said, I think that you'll find that those answers run pretty deep. Look, don't put it past these people. They do stuff like this all the time.
They will stop at nothing to keep their power. We see it time and time again. Before we get into all the psyops, I should probably plug my sponsor at this point, because this is one thing that they don't want people like you in office for, and that's because of local nullification. Now, Township Liberation sponsors this show. I love them with my whole heart. They've been taking care of me for a minute, and they're doing amazing work. You can get this book on Amazon. It's a 76-page read. You can get through it in a day or two. And this is all about how to nullify everything, everywhere. Decentralization, nullification is the key of this book. This is amazing. Follow them on X at Town Liberation and/or at 2FreeMike. Mike Decentralized is a co-author on this book. You really need to read this, because this is how you win.
It's the only answer. It is the answer.
We're not fixing the federal government. We are not fixing it. We are far beyond that. What it is state nullification and/or local nullification, which people like you would have come into play as a state rep saying,
100%.
We are not going to comply to this, that, or the other, when it comes to the federal government. Like, this is, dude, oh my God, Chris, I'm going to put this up there. Speaking of PSYOPs, here's my sponsor. Well played, sir. Well played. Yes.
Speaking.
No, seriously though, like, man, Mike is doing the Lord's work, going out there and doing some serious business.
And every time that I talk to sort of a disenfranchised voter, like when I would talk to like somebody that they were frustrated like I was frustrated, and you could tell that they wanted to be on the right kind of side of things, and we would talk about nullification and how it works and what it was, every one of them is like the light bulb lit up. Like, they got it. I was like, you can either assume that you're going to change this very embedded, entrenched system, right? That is massive. I mean, massive. The federal bureaucracy is massive. Or you can simply say, you know what, we're just not going to do it here. And if enough people say we're not going to do it here, then what are they going to do, right? And like, you can do that. That's something to do. 38 states, I think now, 42 states now, said, screw you, federal government, on cannabis, right?
Right.
That's local nullification. I hate to tell you that, but if you live in a state that has a medical cannabis program or a recreational cannabis program, that's local nullification. There's a federal law and a federal enforcement agency that says you can't do this, and your state said, you know what, we're going to do it. What are
Or
you going
the
to do?
same thing where like a local sheriff will, per se, here in Michigan, they just passed some more laws about guns,
Hmm.
uh, banning bump stocks and ghost guns, or 3D printed guns, as they would say. Um, there's going to be places like Livingston County here in Michigan that are going to say, we are not going to enforce those laws.
Yeah,
So you can do whatever you want and say whatever you want and push whatever you want. We're not going to enforce them. Kiss our behinds. We're not doing it. This is what nullification is about. It could be something as simple as guns. It could be something as big as legal tender laws.
sure.
And like,
So don't get me started on like decentralized banking. We don't have enough time for this right
there's
now.
not. There's really not.
Yeah, there's not enough time for that because I'll put it this way. I've had conversations with lawmakers in the past 12 months in my state, in-depth conversations about what does a financial sanctuary state look like on paper? How does it work? And how do you make that work? How does a state chartered bank in any state participate in the larger system, but also protect its citizens from overreach from federal government and quote unquote 3-letter agencies, and what that actually looks like? And believe it or not, it's not only possible, it's fairly straightforward of how it would be done. So whoever the first state is that gets it right, and I would love to see Arkansas do it, but I don't think we're there yet. I think that the handful of lawmakers that are willing to work with me on this issue are just a handful. But yeah, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at those sort of things because, I mean, ultimately, government is supposed to be protecting your rights. That's the number one job of government.
It's one of their only jobs.
It's literally the only job, in my opinion.
Protect their rights and borders. That's their job.
That's it. And so, like, just today I saw like we have a big problem with not a problem, but there's an issue where they're building a new prison in our state, and some people think that the prison's being thrown upon them, and some backroom deals were happening. Go figure, right? I mean, who would have think that would happen? And a state senator said, public safety is the number one priority of government, or number one function of government. And I was like, no, it's not what it's supposed to do. Your job is not to keep me safe. Your job is to protect my rights. That's what your job is. I can keep myself safe. And if you're not trying to violate my rights, I probably have a good chance of keeping myself pretty safe. Right. I could probably do better than any of you can. I guarantee you I'll be here before you will be here. Right. I can respond quicker than you can respond. I will ultimately have to take care of my own. When the tornado blew our neighborhood apart, it was people like us that were helping other people. The state wasn't here. There was no government here. And so, yeah, and I think financially, as we move into, again, the 21st century, especially as money becomes a much different concept, because we're becoming a digital world, whether we like it or not. Right. And that's going to be very important. Debanking is a real issue, and it's not just debanking from a commercial standpoint or from a private standpoint or from, whatever. We're talking about from, government standpoint. Debanking is in liens and levies against accounts, tracking transactions. Everything comes down to this. Think about how likely would the colonists have been at, overthrowing the British government if every single one of their finances was being watched in real time?
It wouldn't be possible.
It's not possible. Exactly. It would not be possible. So yeah, that's what you're up against. And so that's going to be the very key discussion of one of the top 4 discussions in the next 5 years, in my opinion, is going to be, what does decentralized banking and finance look like in a paradigm for the citizen? And what is the lowest level of government in the current system that can create that level of protection? Is it the state? Is it the county? Is it going to have to be a federal issue? Those are going to be the interesting conversations. And like I said, in one of those really top 4 or 5 sort of discussions the next 5 years.
Okay. Now, to end this show, we're going to go through the 3 PSYOPs that have happened in 2025 so far, because they are PSYOPs. Nobody's going to tell me any different.
Right.
I don't care what anybody says. First one being today. Mike Johnson is reelected as speaker after being shot down the first time.
Did anybody expect anything different? Like, I mean, that's my comment on this, is who thought that wasn't going to happen? Like, this is always going to be it. I think Mike and I are from the same city. We are both born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. I met Mike, speaking of Tea Party, at a Tea Party rally in Bossier City, Louisiana, in like 2008, 2009, when he was in state politics. I had about a 15-minute long conversation in my memories as how long it is. It could have been 5 minutes, but it seems like it was 15. It was fairly lengthy behind the stage at an event. And I thought that he got it. Okay. I thought that he got it. And so when I saw him making his moves into federal government, I was like, well, this is a guy that at least I've talked to. I think that he understands the broader concepts, right? He gets in there and he becomes a speaker. And what does he do? Almost the complete opposite, right? Man, my personal belief is that he doesn't have a choice, put it that way, right? And that you don't want to be the Speaker of the House. You don't want to be that, because there's probably somebody every day saying, look, you can do what you want to do, but we know where your wife and kids are, right?
Right.
And that's really what I think. I mean, when you're talking about trillions of dollars of money flowing through a system, do you think that impetus doesn't exist? Do you really think that people wouldn't do that? Like, cartels behead people for much less commas, right?
And President Bibi will make sure he stays in line. But
so there's no difference. These are human beings. There's a monetary incentives at play, and they're using force and violence. And they have, again, when you're government, you have immunity from prosecution, right? And you can clandestinely operate. And so I think the theme that we've seen in my entire life since the 9/11 era has been this very incestuous relationship between the intelligence agencies, the administrative state, and then foreign actors. And then we just keep this going. And then it just feels like there's always crisis, always a solution, but the solution is always more government, more spending, more to the same people. And it just keeps spiraling out of control. So yeah, that's my opinion on side number one. Mike Johnson doesn't have a choice. I think he's probably a good guy at heart. And he probably thinks, he goes home every night and goes, I can't believe these sons of bitches got me caught up in this. That's probably what's happening.
Well, I mean, he's bought and paid for by AIPAC, and we know who runs the show. So
yeah,
that's just what it is. President Netanyahu is, the one who runs the world at this point. And anyways, we're going to move to the next PSYOP.
Well, we're going to have to make sure we bleep that one out, right? This is going to be delisted.
I mean, what else is new? YouTube hates me. I'm the most censored nobody ever at this point.
Yeah.
But anyhow, next PSYOP. How Zach says China. It could be China, but it's always AIPAC. But it's China too. We know. But next PSYOP is going to be, this is a good one.
Okay.
Cybertruck blows up in front of Trump Tower on New Year's Eve. The guy who's inside the truck has been blown to smithereens. He's not able to be seen, or they can't figure out who he is, right?
Right.
But they damn sure have his ID. That ID did not get burned up in that massive fire that burned him up beyond recognition, which we have seen this before. I believe somewhere around September 11th, 2001, where these planes flew into buildings and these buildings collapsed on the planes and everything was rubble and people were just dust, but they damn sure had these IDs.
Here's the passport. Here's the pristine passport. Again, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. This is, how much more appropriate imagery do you have? Tesla, Cybertruck, Trump Tower, first of the year, 2025. You couldn't write this. If you asked AI to write a crazy New Year's story about incorporating all of sort of the main images in the current political zeitgeist into one story, it would read like this. That's what it would be. It would say Cybertruck, Trump Tower, explosion, ID, government. It would be this would be it. So when I saw it, man, I was just like, we either live in a simulation or we're missing a good opportunity to be in one, because this is this is so weird and crazy. So again, not surprised. And not surprised that we found the ID. Of course we found the ID. Again, I mean, of course. Yeah.
Because the body's burned up beyond recognition, but the ID's just fine, which was probably most likely in his pocket, like everybody else keeps their ID. But hey, I digress.
Well, I mean, and again, everything in my life, in my experience, and what I've been able to empirically observe in the world really comes to 9/11 in my generation, right? I'm 19 years old when this happens. And I'll just remind you that a quote unquote plane supposedly hit the Pentagon, but we don't have a single piece of that plane. It was so destroyed, you don't even have a rivet from the plane, right? And but that was the truth, right? But 2 planes knocked down 3 buildings. You find the passport. It's just, again, the narrative has to be just enough for 80% of the people to not question too hard and for about half of them to totally agree. And that's where you are. And that's what, if you can get that narrative there, and I think the as more and more people become less educated, the narrative that can capture those percentages will be more and more absurd. And that's just where we are, because people don't go, that doesn't make sense anymore. Sean, I just got over the flu. I had the flu. My wife and I, actually, we came back from Detroit about 4 or 5 days after. So I probably got on the airport coming back, and we had the flu.
You were actually supposed to be the last show of the year,
and I got the flu.
Yeah,
and so like I had the real flu, and I remember going, but didn't this disappear? Like, remember that year when it disappeared? It was gone, right? And nobody, and like, you were crazy if you questioned that. If you even suggested, possibly this disease that has the exact same symptoms is really just the flu. In many cases, statistically speaking, because there's this many cases of flu and now there's zero. Look at how many people defended that, right?
And you and your wife were in bad shape. You guys were not in a good place.
I've been sicker. I mean, it wasn't great, it wasn't fun. But, what I'm saying is, again, that it made me think about that. Like, I remember when the quote unquote flu numbers went to zero. And if you question that, you were a conspiracy theorist. And you would have somebody look you dead in the eyes, Sean, and they'd say, well, the reason that flu is at zero is because people are masking and social distancing. And you'd say, well, then why is COVID increasing if they're masking and social distancing? Because the truth is that everything was COVID. That was the truth. Right. And any objective understanding, anybody with 2 brain cells that could communicate could see that was happening. And then again, they even admitted it. Remember, like, I don't remember, like, that coroner was like, yes, if they die and they can test positive, they died from, with COVID, and we're going to put it as a COVID death.
Never mind the $18,000 they got per COVID.
Monetary incentives. Yeah. And everything else. And then again, and so, like I said, if these people believe that, man, I'm surprised that they didn't I'm surprised they haven't said it was like a Terminator that blew it up. Like it was a robot from the future. And that was what blew it. And, and there would be people that believed it if enough people said it, or if the right person said it. So, yeah.
That's right. Now, the final PSYOP, and before we get into the final PSYOP, I want to say that this should be treated very seriously, because it was a really bad situation. Mental health in this world is messed up and blah, blah, blah. But New Year's Eve, a gentleman in New Orleans drives his car through a crowd of people, gets into a shootout with the cops, and the media's first. Now, and while that's bad, that's very bad. Like, these things do happen in real time. As a matter of fact, on New Year's Eve, somebody lost control of their car in Detroit in front of Campus Martius Park and crashed into the fence and did all this and that or the other. But there wasn't a shootout with the cops, and they didn't get the media play. What I'm saying is, this happened in New Orleans, and the first thing they came out with in the media was this was a terrorist attack, and they were probably linked with ISIS.
Mm-hmm. He had an ISIS flag like in the glove box or something, right? Like,
yeah.
Also incredibly convenient. So I'm going to real quick plug a book. Okay. And that's a book that it's this book, and I'm about halfway through it right now. This is Provoked by Scott Horton. This is his new one, and I'm about halfway through it. And the reason I'm plugging that book, it's tangentially related to this, is that the truth is, if when you look at it from an operational standpoint, America has always been on the side of Al Qaeda. Right? That's what we've always been on the side of. And anybody that's we've used them as all of our instruments and tools for everything. So it's no wonder that ISIS is like the flag that's in the glove box, right? It's no wonder that this is like the thing. I don't know where this all comes from and goes. In fact, I think probably the most common explanation is that this is a person that was deeply disturbed and wanted to harm people, because people do that, right? But it sure seems like someone did not miss an opportunity to label it as something else, right?
Right.
And so when I've seen how quickly the media, and you have too, can manipulate public opinion, again, all they have to do is focus on something. That's it. Like I said, that many people die. I'm not trying to discount this tragedy. Please understand. I'm not trying to do that. But this many people get killed every day in New Orleans, and it never gets looked at. It never gets highlighted. It never gets covered. The media is very good at making sure that if it's just talked about, it becomes the subject of focus. And so that's what they did. It's not just like, oh, look, this tragedy happened. It's now this discussion of terrorism. I wonder what that discussion is going to look like as far as a national security discussion moves forward. I mean, we just had sort of this with sort of the drone thing. Remember the drones? The
Oh, yeah.
Iranian mothership? Remember the Iranian mothership?
Which is the funny thing. It's like they're looking for another false flag after false flag to get people riled up.
And they finally got one to click. And so that's, and then meanwhile, while this is all going on, they already have this pre-drafted legislation on drones, right? Because the truth is that they're watching Ukraine footage and they're like, oh, wow, this is really a 2A issue. In my opinion, the drone conversation is a Second Amendment conversation.
Yes, 100%.
Okay. So, I mean, because they are being used as arms, and this is what's happening, and they're watching the Ukraine-Russian conflict and going, holy crap, there's like these 18-year-old kids, and they're strapping improvised explosives to these, and they're doing damage to an organized military, right? We gotta wrap this up. We can't have these American rednecks with these drones. So all of a sudden, we're gonna start flying them Iranian mothership, and we have this legislation here to lock all this down and begin these studies and everything. I personally believe, Sean, this is that all freedoms you enjoy today are all under attack always for the future. Because yes. I've watched all freedoms slowly go away. Think about what you could do without government permission 100 years ago compared to what you can do today without government permission. You can almost do nothing without government permission. The ability to travel freely and operate a vehicle individually is a freedom that one day will not exist in this country if we don't safeguard that. And the impetus and the discussion will be, of course, about safety. So there's always a part of me that kind of thinks things like that when I see this. And I'm not saying that this is going to be pointed to, but I wouldn't be surprised if it makes a list in 10 years or 12 years when this is being discussed. If hey, we're going to eliminate, you have to have a driverless car, an autonomous vehicle. We don't have drivered cars anymore. You can have one, but the insurance is crazy. You got to pass a background check to have a car. Just think about that. And because again, that's not so far off the realm of understanding. It's sad that every tragedy gets turned into sort of, again, the fodder and sort of prefiguring the next, stripping of rights. But that's just what this is. And it's important that people safeguard against that. That's the real tragedy is the rights that people will lose in the future. And if you want to honor those who were killed in New Orleans or in any tragedy, make sure that no one's rights are taken away because of their death. That's how you dishonor them, is you strip the rights away and freedoms away from other people. You turn their death then, I think, into a real tragedy at that point in time.
And man, you're always great with your words, and I don't know what to even say because you kind of just drove that nail down. Now let's end the show because it's Friday night and we got
some stuff to
do. And thank you so much for coming on here. But let's be real quick, you guys. Like, we talked about what's going on in Arkansas with the election fraud. If you think it's only happening there, I would highly recommend you give a second thought to that, because if it's happening there, it's happening here in Michigan. It's happening in California, in Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, you name it.
I have one call to action I'll insert there. If you live in a state or an area that uses ES&S poll books, and you can find out from your county, contact me on X or on Facebook or from my website or whatever. It's on the screen here at MW for Liberty, MW number 4 Liberty on X. And I can talk to you about, maybe we can look at the FOIA laws in your area. And we are working on some pre-drafted requests that citizens can file. Because I believe that this is going to have to be a coordinated effort from multiple jurisdictions against this technology for it to ever get any headway. If we're fighting it at one county, I don't know if we get there. But if we can file these sort of discoveries in 200 counties across multiple states, I think that we have a real chance of showing that this is a glaring security hole that's being exploited. And again, so if you are in a county or a state that uses ES&S poll books, contact me. I want to be in touch with you.
Amen, brother. And you're doing the Lord's work seriously, because, we as individuals are being cheated by the system daily when it comes to just everything. And now they're coming after our quote unquote voting rights. No, there has to be a stand at some point. But y'all, thank you so much for your time. Mike, I love you, man. You're doing great things over there. And until next week, man, peace, love, and liberty, y'all.
Yeah, man. Peace, love, liberty. Thanks for having me, Sean. Appreciate it.
Thank you.